The Quiet Valley. The first hint of light, a faint smear of pearl and rose, was still an hour off when Jacob's eyes opened. The air in the bedroom was cool and still, carrying the faint, earthy scent of the hayloft beneath them. He moved with an innate quietness, his bare feet finding the familiar worn planks of the floor. There was no alarm clock, no blaring radio, just the subtle shift in the pre-dawn stillness that signaled the world was preparing to wake. He pulled on his dark trousers and a simple chambray shirt, the movements economical and practiced. Every morning began the same, a rhythm established over generations, a testament to a life lived in harmony with the natural pulse of the day. Outside, the darkness was profound, pierced only by the distant, unwavering gleam of stars. The air, crisp and damp, carried the perfume of dew-kissed grass and rich soil. The barn, a hulking silhouette against the barely lightening eastern sky, welcomed him with a soft rustle of bedding and the warm, bovine breath of his small herd. No whirring motors here, no electric lights. A kerosene lantern, its flame a steady golden eye, cast dancing shadows as he moved among the stalls. He spoke to each cow, a low murmur of greeting, his hand stroking their flanks. Bess, an old, reliable Guernsey, shifted her weight, a soft, lowing sound escaping her. Jacob settled onto the three-legged stool, the cool metal pail between his knees. The rhythmic shick, shick, shick of milk hitting the pail began, a comforting, timeless sound. His fingers, strong and calloused, worked with a gentle precision, coaxing the warm, creamy liquid from Bess's udder. It was a meditation, this act, a direct connection to the sustenance of his family, untouched by any intermediary. Each pail filled, he poured the frothy milk into a larger stainless steel container, then moved to the next cow, repeating the ancient ritual until the container was heavy and brimming. Back in the kitchen, the wood stove glowed with a deep, inviting warmth. Sarah was already there, her silhouette graceful as she moved about, preparing for the day. "Morning, Jacob," she said, her voice soft, a hint of sleep still clinging to it. The scent of wood smoke mingled with the sweet aroma of rising dough. "Morning, Sarah. Milk's in," he replied, setting the heavy pail on the counter. Young Daniel, still half asleep, stumbled into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. "Papa, can I help?" he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. "Aye, son. We'll need flour for our breakfast." Jacob gestured towards the hand-cranked grain mill on the sturdy oak table. Daniel's eyes brightened. He loved the satisfying crunch of the wheat berries as they transformed into fine powder. With a little guidance from Jacob, Daniel poured a scoop of hard red wheat into the hopper. The small boy gripped the handle with both hands, straining slightly as he turned it, the gears groaning softly, spitting out a fine, pale stream of flour into the bowl below. Jacob watched, a quiet pride blooming in his chest. This was how it was passed down, piece by piece, generation to generation. Sarah, meanwhile, was kneading the bread dough on a well-floured board, her movements fluid and strong. The stovetop sizzled as she laid strips of cured bacon into a cast-iron pan. The aroma of sizzling pork quickly filled the kitchen, a promise of hearty nourishment. Soon, the freshly ground flour, still warm from the mill, was being mixed with eggs from their own hens, milk from their cows, and a pinch of baking soda to create a thick batter for griddle cakes. Jacob moved with purpose, fetching kindling from the wood box beside the stove, ensuring the fire was robust enough for baking. He took a heavy iron skillet from a hook, his fingers testing its weight and balance. This was his world, meticulously crafted and maintained. Every tool, every task, every ingredient was known intimately. There was no quick fix, no disposable convenience, just the enduring satisfaction of self-reliance, of knowing that every bite of food, every stitch of clothing, every board in their home was a direct result of their own labor. Daniel, his cheeks flushed from his efforts at the grain mill, looked up at Jacob. "Papa, will we plant the new corn today?" Jacob smiled, a gentle crinkle at the corners of his eyes. "Aye, son, if the ground is right and the sun holds. We'll hitch up old Molly after breakfast. A good day for planting, I reckon." The boy nodded eagerly, already picturing the rich earth turning under the plow, the neat rows of seeds waiting for the sun's embrace. In this quiet valley, amidst the gentle rhythms of farm life, lay a profound strength, a stubborn adherence to a way of being that modern progress had long forgotten. It was a life of unending work, yes, but also of deep contentment, of knowing one's place in the grand tapestry of creation. And Jacob, with his strong hands and quiet spirit, was its steadfast guardian. Hands in the earth. The sun, a shy whisper of peach and gold, was already painting the eastern sky when Jacob hitched Benjamin to the plow. The old horse, a sturdy draft with a coat like polished mahogany, exhaled a plume of warm breath into the cool morning air. Jacob's calloused hands, familiar with every curve of the harness leather, worked with an economy of motion honed by decades. Daniel, still in his nightshirt, stood by the garden fence, rubbing the sleep from his eyes with a grubby fist. He watched, fascinated, as his father adjusted the straps, the buckles clinking softly. "Ready, Benjamin?" Jacob murmured, his voice a low rumble. He gripped the wooden handles of the plow, the worn grain smooth beneath his touch. With a gentle click of his tongue, Benjamin leaned into the harness. The steel share, gleaming from last night's cleaning, bit into the dark earth. A rich, earthy scent, damp and alive, instantly bloomed in the air, a fragrance that spoke of promise and sustenance. The plow cut a straight furrow, turning the soil in a rhythmic, unhurried dance. Jacob walked behind it, his gaze fixed on the turning earth, guiding Benjamin with subtle commands and a light touch on the reins. Each pass was a testament to his practiced skill, the furrows perfectly spaced, ready to cradle new life. Daniel, now dressed in his work clothes, scurried to keep pace, his small legs pumping. He reached out to touch the newly turned earth, marveling at its crumbly texture. "Can I help?" Daniel asked, his voice bright with eagerness. Jacob paused at the end of a row, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. "Soon, son. We need the soil just so before the planting begins." He showed Daniel how to pick out any stubborn stones or stray roots from the turned earth, explaining how they could hinder a young sprout's growth. Daniel meticulously gathered a handful of pebbles, his brow furrowed in concentration. By mid-morning, the garden plot was a series of neat, parallel furrows. Jacob returned to the shed, emerging with a wooden bucket overflowing with a mixture of seeds. Corn, beans, squash, a vibrant tapestry of future harvests. He also carried a simple wooden dibber, a pointed stick smoothed by countless repetitions. "These are corn seeds," Jacob said, holding out a handful of golden kernels to Daniel. "Each one a tiny promise." Daniel carefully took a seed, examining its ridged surface. "They look like little teeth," he observed, a thoughtful expression on his face. Jacob chuckled. "Indeed. Now, watch." He knelt, his knees sinking slightly into the soft soil. With the dibber, he poked a small, precise hole in the earth, just deep enough. He dropped a single corn seed into the hole, then gently covered it with loose soil, patting it down with his palm. Not too deep, not too shallow, just right. He moved down the row, repeating the motion, his movements fluid and efficient. Daniel, mimicking his father, picked up a discarded twig and tried to make his own holes. His first attempts were wobbly and uneven, but with Jacob's patient guidance, they slowly improved. "Remember the spacing, Daniel," Jacob instructed, showing him how to measure roughly with his hand. Each plant needs room to breathe, room to grow strong. Daniel, despite his sometimes clumsy nature, possessed a remarkable knack for observation. He quickly grasped the rhythm, the deliberate pace, the respect with which his father treated each seed. He even began to anticipate Jacob's next move, offering a small stone that had been overlooked, or reaching for a fallen dibber before Jacob even noticed it was gone. The sun climbed higher, casting shorter shadows. The rhythmic thud of the dibber, the soft rustle of seeds, and the occasional chirping of a bird were the only sounds in the warm air. Jacob worked with a quiet determination, each seed placed with the understanding that it represented a meal, a season's labor, a year's sustenance. Daniel, by his side, was not just helping, he was absorbing, learning the fundamental language of the earth, a silent dialogue passed down through generations. He felt the cool soil between his fingers, smelled its richness, and saw the careful hand that coaxed life from it. This wasn't just planting, it was an act of faith, a collaboration with the very essence of creation. Mending what's broken. The rhythmic shk, thunk of Jacob's plough cutting through the rich earth provided a steady counterpoint to the chirping sparrows. He guided the horse with practiced hands, the scent of turned soil rising like a benediction. Daniel, small but earnest, followed behind, carefully dropping seeds into the freshly opened furrows. "Not too deep now," Jacob murmured, his voice a low rumble. "Just enough to kiss the sun when she rises." Daniel nodded, his brow furrowed in concentration. It was a dance as old as time, a testament to patience and trust in the land. Later, as the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the fields, Jacob turned his attention to a section of the perimeter fence. Years of harsh winters and baking summers had taken their toll. Several posts had rotted at their base, leaving gaps where livestock might wander, or, worse, where predators might enter. He retrieved his saw, the steel blade gleaming in the afternoon light, and a sturdy mallet from the shed. He selected a fallen oak branch, already seasoned, and began to saw. The wood groaned under the friction, releasing a sweet, earthy perfume. Each stroke was deliberate, a testament to his understanding of the wood's grain. He carved a pointed end on the fresh posts, then, with a powerful swing of the mallet, drove the first one deep into the earth. The impact resonated through his arms, a satisfying jolt. Daniel watched, occasionally offering to help, and Jacob allowed him to hold the level, teaching him the importance of plumb. As dusk approached, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, a sudden gust of wind brought with it the distinct patter of water droplets. Not from the sky, but from directly above the barn. Jacob's eyes narrowed. A leak. He finished securing the last fence post, then made his way to the barn. Inside, a small, dark stain bloomed on one of the ancient timbers supporting the loft. He returned with his ladder, not a factory-made contraption, but one he'd built himself from ash and hickory, its joints secured with pegs and rawhide. It was sturdy, dependable. He leaned it against the weathered side of the barn and ascended, each rung groaning softly under his weight. At the top, the wind ruffled his hair. He carefully stepped onto the sloped roof, his boots finding purchase on the rough shingles. He located the culprit. A cluster of old wooden shingles, brittle and warped, had finally given way. He carried the small satchel containing his repair tools and a stack of new shingles, hand-cut and seasoned, each one smelling faintly of cedar. With a small, flat pry bar, he carefully lifted the surrounding intact shingles, exposing the underlying battens. The old, broken pieces came away easily, crumbling in his hands. He meticulously cleaned the area, brushing away debris, then began laying the new shingles. He started from the bottom, ensuring each new piece overlapped the one below, creating an impenetrable barrier against the elements. The rhythmic tapping of his small hammer securing each shingle echoed across the quiet farm. He worked with a quiet intensity, his movements precise, almost meditative. The sky darkened further, and the air grew cooler. By the time the last new shingle was firmly in place, the first stars had begun to prick through the indigo canvas overhead. He descended the ladder, his muscles aching pleasantly, a deep satisfaction settling over him.
The barn, once again, was sound.
Bounty of the season. The crisp morning air carried the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. Inside, Sarah hummed a quiet tune, her hands dusted with flour as she kneaded the bread dough with practiced, rhythmic movements. The rising sun, still low, cast long, golden streaks across the kitchen floor, illuminating dust motes dancing in the warmth. Outside, Jacob was already harnessing Bess, the mare's breath steaming in the cool air. Today was a day of gathering, a day to secure their sustenance against the coming chill. By mid-morning, the entire family was out in the sprawling garden, a vibrant tapestry of greens and browns. Daniel, his small hands already grubby, carefully pulled carrots from the soil, their orange brilliance a stark contrast to the dark earth clinging to them.
He'd learned the knack of twisting and pulling just so, ensuring the full root emerged. "Look, Papa!" he exclaimed, holding up a particularly stout carrot, its feathery green top still attached. Jacob smiled, his own hands full of potatoes he was unearthing with a digging fork.
"That's a fine one, son. Good work." He worked with an almost meditative rhythm, the tines of the fork sinking into the earth, lifting a clump, then sifting the soil to reveal the tubers. His movements were efficient, born of years of experience, each action precise and purposeful. The large wicker baskets scattered around them quickly began to fill, first with the earthy scent of potatoes, then the sweeter aroma of carrots. Sarah, moving between the rows, had an uncanny ability to spot the ripe heads of cabbage, their leaves still dewy from the morning. With a swift, clean cut of her knife, she separated them from their stalks, placing them gently into another basket. They worked as a well-oiled team, a quiet symphony of effort. No words were wasted, but every glance, every shared smile conveyed understanding and appreciation. The sun climbed higher, warming their backs, and the air filled with the quiet rustle of leaves, the soft thud of vegetables hitting wicker, and the occasional excited chatter from Daniel. As the afternoon sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the fields, the filled baskets were heavy and numerous. Bess, hitched to the small cart, patiently waited as Jacob and Sarah carefully loaded their bounty. Daniel, though tired, insisted on helping push the last, overflowing basket onto the cart, his small frame straining with the effort. The root cellar, a subterranean haven beneath the barn, was their next destination. It was a place of cool, damp quiet, smelling of earth and stored sweetness. Inside, shelves lined the packed earth walls, and bins waited in anticipation. Jacob lit a lantern, its soft glow illuminating the space. "All right, Daniel," he said, handing the boy a small, shallow basket. "Careful now." Daniel, his eyes wide with curiosity, watched as Jacob began the meticulous process of storage. The potatoes, dried of excess soil, were carefully layered into a large wooden bin, separated by straw to prevent bruising and rot. "Why the straw, Papa?" Daniel asked, his voice echoing slightly in the confined space. "It keeps them from touching too much and helps keep the air moving around them," Jacob explained, his voice low and steady. "Prevents the bad spots from spreading." Next came the carrots. These Jacob buried in damp sand, meticulously arranged in another bin. "This keeps them crisp, like they just came from the ground," he told Daniel, demonstrating how to nestle each carrot in the cool, moist grains. Finally, the apples. Red and green, Plump and fragrant, they were individually wrapped in newspaper, then carefully placed on slatted shelves. "These need to breathe, but not too much," Sarah explained, her fingers deft as she folded the newspaper around each fruit. "And the paper stops them from spoiling each other." As the last apple found its place, the cellar felt full, a tangible promise against the lean months ahead. Jacob surveyed their work, a deep satisfaction settling over him. The air was thick with the earthy perfume of potatoes, the sweet tang of apples, and the subtle scent of damp sand. This was their wealth, meticulously gathered and carefully preserved, a testament to hard work and forethought. Daniel, tired but beaming, had learned not just how to store food, but the immense value of every single item. He ran his hand over the cool, damp wall, a sense of security settling in his young heart. The bounty of the season had been secured. Sweet spring tradition. The crisp morning air still held the bite of winter, but a subtle softening hinted at spring's imminent arrival. Jacob, with Bess patiently pulling the cart behind him, made his way through the sugar bush, the woods awakening around them. His breath plumed in the cool air as he dismounted, his calloused hands already reaching for the hand drill. Young Daniel, bundled in a wool coat, scampered ahead, his eyes scanning the maples. "This one, Jacob!" Daniel pointed to a stately tree, its bark deeply furrowed. Jacob smiled, a rare, genuine expression that softened the lines around his eyes. "A good choice, Daniel. She's a generous one." He took the drill, its auger gleaming dully in the nascent sunlight. With a practiced rhythm, he pressed the bit against the bark, turning the handle steadily. The wood shavings, pale and sweet-smelling, spiraled out, falling to the damp earth. A small, perfectly round hole emerged. Jacob then gently hammered a spile into the opening, a tiny spout for the tree's bounty. He hung a metal bucket from the spile, and within moments, a single, clear drop of sap welled up, quivering on the tip before falling with a soft plink into the bucket. The sound was the first note in a symphony of the season. They worked their way through the stand, a meditative rhythm developing between them. Jacob drilled, Daniel hung buckets, his small fingers surprisingly adept. The woods echoed with the quiet sounds of their labor, the gentle thud of the hammer, the soft plink of sap, the rustle of dry leaves underfoot. By midday, a dozen buckets shimmered on the trees, each a promise of future sweetness. Collecting the sap was Daniel's favorite part. He clutched a smaller pail, his face alight with excitement, as Jacob poured the clear liquid from the tree-hung buckets into a larger barrel on the cart. The sap, cold and pure, sloshed gently, a liquid treasure. "It looks like water, Jacob," Daniel observed, peering into the barrel. "It is mostly water, Daniel," Jacob explained, his voice even and patient. "But within it, the tree has stored the sugar from last summer's sun. We just help it along." Back at the sugar shack, a simple open-sided shelter, a roaring fire already licked at the stones of the fire pit. Jacob had started it before they left, the smoke a thin column against the pale sky. A massive cast-iron kettle, blackened with years of use, hung precariously over the flames, supported by a sturdy metal tripod. Jacob, with Daniel's eager assistance, carefully poured the collected sap into the kettle. Steam immediately began to rise, carrying with it a faint, earthy sweetness. The boiling was a slow, deliberate process, a test of patience and skill. Jacob took up a long-handled wooden paddle, worn smooth from countless hours of stirring. He moved it with a continuous circular motion, ensuring the sap didn't scorch. Daniel, perched on a fallen log, watched, fascinated by the transformation. The clear liquid gradually deepened in color, transforming from watery transparency
to a pale amber, then to a rich golden hue. The air grew thick with the cloying, comforting scent of caramelizing sugar. "How do you know when it's ready, Jacob?" Daniel asked, his voice barely a whisper against the crackle of the fire. Jacob's gaze was fixed on the bubbling surface. "It's a feeling, Daniel. It danced between the steam and the thickness. You watch the bubbles, how they rise, how they break, and you listen to the sound." He dipped the paddle, bringing up a spoonful. The liquid clung to the wood, coating it in a thin, glistening film. "See how it coats the paddle? And how it drips in a sheet, not in separate drops." He continued to stir, his face impassive, yet a subtle satisfaction played around his lips.
The sap simmered, thickening further, the aroma growing more intense. Finally, with a decisive nod, Jacob declared, "It's time." He carefully lifted the heavy kettle from the fire, the muscles in his forearms bulging. The steam billowed around them, momentarily obscuring his face. He poured the hot, golden liquid through a felt filter, catching any impurities. The resulting syrup, rich and clear, flowed into glass jars, each one a testament to the spring tradition, to the work of their hands, and to the generosity of the maple trees. Jacob capped the jars, lining them up on a rough-hewn table. He wiped his hands on his trousers, a contented sigh escaping him. Daniel, his face smudged with ash, beamed. "It's perfect, Jacob." Jacob merely smiled, surveying the row of jars. It was indeed perfect. Another sweet spring tradition, mastered and passed on. The storm's challenge. The wind, a banshee wail through the valley, had been the first sign. Then came the rain. Not a gentle spring shower, but a relentless deluge that beat against the cabin's sturdy walls with an almost malicious intent. Jacob had spent the afternoon securing anything loose in the yard. The stacked firewood, the empty buckets by the sugar shack, even a loose shutter that had begun to creak ominously. Elder Gideon, ever the calm presence, sat by the hearth, whittling a small bird from a piece of pine, his gaze occasionally drifting to the window where the world outside was a blurry watercolor of grey and green. Sarah, humming softly, had turned her focus to the evening meal, the rhythmic thud of her hands kneading dough a comforting counterpoint to the storm's fury. The scent of rising yeast mingled with the earthy aroma of the rain-soaked world, a testament to life continuing even amidst nature's upheaval. By dusk, the storm began to retreat, leaving behind a silence so profound it was almost deafening, broken only by the drip of water from the eaves and the distant gurgle of the swollen creek. A pale, watery light filtered through the thinning clouds, painting the soaked landscape in muted tones. The next morning, the air was crisp, washed clean, carrying the invigorating scent of pine and wet earth. Jacob rose before dawn, his usual routine. After the morning prayers and a simple breakfast of oatmeal and fresh milk, he ventured out. The yard was littered with small branches and leaves, but no major damage was immediately apparent. His concern, however, turned to the path leading down to the creek, where their fresh spring water flowed. He followed the familiar worn track, his boots squelching in the mud. He noticed fallen limbs, thicker than usual, scattered across the ground, and a lingering scent of ozone. As he rounded the bend where the path narrowed, he stopped abruptly. A giant oak, a sentinel that had stood for generations, lay prone across the trail. Its gnarled roots, torn from the earth, reached skyward like pleading fingers, and its massive trunk, wider than Jacob's shoulders, completely obliterated the path. One glance told him this was no task for a single man, or even two. This was a whole community's endeavor. He returned to the cabin, the gravity of the obstruction weighing on his mind. Elder Gideon was sipping herbal tea on the porch, watching a robin peck at a worm in the damp grass. "The storm left its mark, did it, Jacob?" Gideon's voice was gentle, observant. "Aye, elder, a mighty oak, fallen across the path to the creek. The spring run is blocked." Jacob's voice was calm, but the underlying concern was clear. Gideon nodded slowly, his eyes thoughtful. "A tree that size, it will require many hands."
And strong backs. "Indeed," Jacob agreed, his gaze sweeping across the fields towards the distant homesteads of their neighbors.
"The path is impassable. We'll need to clear it before anyone else tries to fetch water or travels to the mill." He knew the news would spread quickly once the first visitor arrived, but the direct approach was always best. "I'll send young Caleb with a message to the Miller family and the Stoltzfusses. They'll understand the urgency." Sarah emerged from the cellar, a basket of ripe green cabbage nestled in the crook of her arm. Her cheeks flushed from the cool, earthy air. "The winter apples are holding well, Jacob," she reported, her voice cheerful. "I sorted through them this morning. Barely a blemish on the lot, thanks to your careful storage method." She hummed a little tune, then noticed the somber expression on Jacob's face. "What troubles you, dear?" Jacob explained the fallen oak. Sarah's brow furrowed slightly. "That's a shame. It was a beautiful tree. But we'll manage, won't we? Like we always do." Her simple faith in their collective ability was a quiet comfort. She began expertly quartering the cabbage, preparing it for the evening's meal, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. She continued, "The last of the summer apples are nearly gone, but the winter stores are bountiful. We still have a good supply of dried apples, enough to last until the new harvest." She loaded the quartered cabbage into a wooden cart, ready to be taken to the root cellar for pickling. She explained, "Storing them carefully, away from the potatoes and onions, helps them last longer, you know. The ethylene gas from the ripening fruit can speed up spoilage." Her words, while practical, also served as a subtle reminder of the intricate web of knowledge required to sustain their way of life. Jacob watched her, a small, knowing smile touching his lips. "Aye, Sarah, we always do." He turned his thoughts to the logistics of the task ahead. The axes, the saws, the ropes, the sheer manpower needed. It wouldn't be easy, but there was a quiet strength in the knowledge that when the community faced a challenge, they faced it together. The storm had passed, but its challenge remained, a test of their resolve and their unity. Strength in unity. The morning sun, still low and hazy, cast long shadows across the yard as Jacob stood on the porch, his gaze fixed on the creek path. The ancient oak, a victim of the previous night's storm, lay sprawled like a wounded giant, its gnarled branches a tangled barricade. He took a deep breath, the scent of damp earth and crushed leaves filling his lungs. "Today's the day," he murmured, more to himself than anyone. Sarah emerged from the kitchen, a steaming kettle in one hand, a basket of freshly laundered linens in the other. Her bonnet framed a face alight with practical cheerfulness. "The Lord provides, Jacob. Always has, always will." She paused, her eyes following his to the downed timber. "A mighty task, that, but not one we face alone." She nodded towards the dusty lane, where the first wagons were already rumbling into view. Young Daniel, all elbows and boundless energy, burst from the barn, a small, polished axe clutched in his hand. "Papa, are they here to help with the tree? Can I help too?" His eyes, wide with curiosity, darted between the approaching neighbors and the immense obstacle. "It's bigger than the barn," Jacob smiled, a rare, gentle crinkle at the corners of his eyes. "Indeed, Daniel. And yes, you can help. Every hand makes the load lighter." He turned to greet Elder Gideon, whose wagon had just pulled up, the sturdy horse puffing softly. Elder Gideon, his beard a snowy white against his dark coat, stepped down with a deliberate calm. He surveyed the scene, his gaze unwavering as he took in the sheer bulk of the fallen oak. A formidable adversary, Brother Jacob. The good Lord certainly tested our resolve last night. He then clapped Jacob on the shoulder. But he also blessed us with good neighbors. Within minutes, the yard buzzed with quiet activity. Men unhitched their horses, children spilled from wagons, their excited chatter a counterpoint to the more serious murmurs of the adults. Jacob, standing near the prostrate tree, began to outline his plan, his voice clear and steady. We'll start with the smaller branches, clear a working space. Then, with axes, we'll section the main trunk. Once cut, we'll use ropes and leverage to roll the pieces aside. He gestured with a broad sweep of his arm. It will take precision and it will take strength. But together, we will open this path. The air soon filled with the rhythmic thud of axes striking wood. Daniel, too small for a full-sized axe, diligently gathered smaller branches, dragging them to a growing pile at the edge of the clearing.
He tripped once, sending a scattering of twigs, but quickly scrambled up, his cheeks flushed with determination. He noticed a patch of unusual moss on one of the larger branches and made a mental note to ask Papa about it later. Jacob, working alongside his neighbors, guided the effort. He showed them the best angles for their cuts, how to maximize the swing of their axes, ensuring efficiency and safety. The main trunk was a formidable challenge, its ancient wood dense and resistant. Sweat beaded on foreheads, muscles strained, but the men worked with a silent, synchronized purpose. Once the massive trunk was sectioned, the real test of unity began. Thick hemp ropes, brought by several families, were secured around the first colossal log. Jacob took his position at the lead rope, his feet planted firmly. "All right, brothers, on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. With a collective grunt, the men pulled. The ropes stretched taut, groaning under the immense strain. Slowly, agonizingly, the log began to shift, grinding against the earth. Dust billowed, and the air filled with the scent of raw wood and exertion. Daniel, watching from a safe distance, clenched his small fists, silently urging them on. He saw the veins standing out on his father's arms, the strained expressions on the faces of the men. He thought of his own small efforts with the branches and understood, for the first time, the true meaning of a shared burden. They repeated the process, section by section, each piece of the oak yielding to their combined might. The sun climbed higher, beating down with increasing intensity, but the pace never faltered. Sarah and the other women had set up a makeshift refreshment station, offering cool water and slices of apple pie, a welcome respite. By late afternoon, the path, once impassable, lay clear. The sections of the great oak were neatly stacked to the side, ready for future use as firewood or building material. Jacob stood surveying their work, a profound sense of satisfaction settling over him. He wiped his brow with the back of his hand, feeling the ache in his muscles, a good, honest ache. Elder Gideon approached, a gentle smile gracing his lips. "Well done, Brother Jacob, a testament to God's grace and the strength He bestows upon us when we work as one." Daniel, tired but beaming, ran up to Jacob. "We did it, Papa! The path is open!" He pointed to the now clear way to the creek, a triumph in his voice. Jacob knelt, placing a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Yes, son, we did. And remember this day. Remember what can be accomplished when many hands work with one heart." He looked out at the gathered community, their faces tired but content. The creek path, once blocked, now beckoned, a clear testament to the power of shared effort, proving that even the largest obstacles could be moved, not by machines, but by the unwavering strength found in unity. A different world. The rhythmic thwack of axes striking wood echoed through the valley, a symphony of purpose that vibrated through Jacob's bones. Sweat beaded on his brow, mingling with sawdust as he guided the two-man saw through the stubborn trunk of the fallen oak.
Beside him, young David, barely strong enough to hold his end, grunted with effort, his small frame trembling. Around them, a dozen men, young and old, toiled with a quiet efficiency, clearing the debris of the recent storm. The air, crisp and pine-scented, invigorated Jacob, filling him with the quiet satisfaction of collective labor. This was their life, a dance with nature, a testament to what hands and will could achieve. A sudden rustle in the undergrowth, too sharp for a deer, too clumsy for a rabbit, drew his attention. He paused, wiping his brow with the back of a calloused hand. Emerging from the dense thicket of blackberry bushes, looking as though he'd been spat out by a different century, was a boy. He was thin, dressed in faded denim and a brightly colored t-shirt depicting some unidentifiable graphic, his hair a tousled mess. His eyes, wide and bewildered, darted around the scene, taking in the oxen patiently waiting, the men with their simple tools, the sheer, unyielding physicality of it all. Leo squinted, his smartphone, dead for hours, feeling like a useless weight in his pocket. He'd followed what he thought was a trail, but it had dissolved into a tangled mess of branches and briars. Now, in a clearing bathed in the afternoon sun, he saw something that defied explanation. Men, dressed in dark, plain clothes, were cutting down a tree with saws? Hand saws? And what was that massive, horned creature pulling a log? It looked like a scene from a history book, only it was happening now, right in front of him. The air thrummed with the soft groans of wood and the hushed murmurs of men, a stark contrast to the constant hum of traffic and distant sirens he was used to.
He felt a sudden, dizzying disconnect, as if he'd stumbled through a portal.
Jacob, sensing the boy's apprehension, lowered his axe. He saw the confusion etched on the young face, the lost quality in the eyes. "You look a mite turned around, son," he called out, his voice calm and steady, cutting through the forest sounds. "Are you lost?" Leo flinched, startled by the direct address. He opened his mouth, then closed it, unsure how to articulate the profound disorientation he felt. Yeah, I think so," he stammered, his gaze still fixed on the team of oxen. They were huge, their breath misting in the cool air. He'd only ever seen them in pictures. Young Daniel, who had been struggling to roll a smaller branch, dropped it with a thud and jogged over, curiosity sparkling in his eyes. "Look, Papa, he's got shiny shoes," he exclaimed, pointing at Leo's worn sneakers, which indeed caught the sunlight in a way their sturdy leather boots never would.
Jacob offered Leo a kind, reassuring smile.
"No harm in that. We get folks wandering through from time to time. You're a fair distance from the main road, though. Where were you headed?" He gestured with a nod towards the path leading back to his farm. "Come on, rest a spell. We'll get you some water, and then we can figure things out." Leo hesitated for a moment. Then, driven by a parched throat and a gnawing sense of helplessness, he nodded. As he walked past the men, he couldn't help but stare. Their faces were honest, their hands strong, their movements deliberate. There were no earbuds, no glowing screens, no hurried calls. Just the raw, unadorned work. He felt a strange mixture of awe and unease, like an alien observing a foreign species. This wasn't just a different place, it was a different world entirely. The last vestiges of daylight bled from the sky, painting the western horizon in hues of bruised violet and smoldering orange. Jacob, his silhouette tall and unyielding against the fading light, led Leo through the deepening woods. The air, crisp and carrying the scent of pine and damp earth, was a balm after the day's unnerving events. Leo stumbled occasionally, his city-soft feet ill-suited for the uneven terrain, but Jacob's steady pace remained unbroken. "We'll be at my place before the stars are fully out," Jacob stated, his voice a low rumble that seemed to harmonize with the rustling leaves. He glanced skyward, a practiced, almost unconscious gesture. See that bright one? Just above that cluster of pines. That's Polaris, the North Star. Always points true. Useful when you're out in the dark. Leo squinted, trying to discern the faint pinprick Jacob indicated. His dead smartphone, a smooth, dark rectangle in his pocket, felt heavier than usual, a useless relic of a world that suddenly seemed impossibly distant. I used to just follow the GPS, he admitted, the words feeling foreign and inadequate.
Jacob chuckled, a warm, resonant sound.
Technology has its place, I suppose, for some. But the sun and stars, they don't need charging. They've been here since time began, and they'll be here long after our contraptions fail. He paused at a small clearing, gesturing towards a gnarled oak. See how the moss grows thicker on that side of the trunk? That's generally north too in these parts. Not as precise as Polaris, but good enough in a pinch. He then demonstrated how to approximate the time by the sun's position, even as it dipped below the tree line. Your shadow, when it's shortest, tells you midday. Then you can gauge the rest. As the first truly bright stars began to pepper the obsidian canvas above, Jacob pointed out constellations, weaving stories of ancient mariners and farmers who relied on these celestial patterns for planting and travel. Leo listened, captivated, a sense of wonder slowly displacing his earlier fear and confusion.
It was a language he'd never learned, a wisdom he'd never encountered, yet it felt profoundly right. They walked on, the rhythmic crunch of their boots on fallen leaves the only sound for a long stretch. Leo found himself looking at the world differently, not just seeing trees, but recognizing the subtle hints of direction and time within them. He saw the world as Jacob saw it, a living, breathing guide, constantly offering information if one only knew how to listen. Finally, a faint glow appeared through the trees, the soft, steady light of a lantern. Jacob's home, a sturdy, unassuming farmhouse, emerged from the encroaching darkness, warm and inviting. The aroma of wood smoke and something savory cooking drifted on the evening air. "We're here," Jacob said, a note of quiet satisfaction in his voice. "Come, you must be hungry." Leo followed him onto the porch, his eyes wide with a newfound appreciation for the simplicity and self-sufficiency of Jacob's life. The evening air, cool and fresh, was a stark contrast to the stale, recycled air of his usual environment. He realized he hadn't felt this connected to the natural world, this grounded, in years. The world suddenly felt bigger, more intricate, yet also more manageable if one just knew how to read its ancient script. He felt a seed of something new take root within him, a burgeoning curiosity that he knew would linger long after he returned to his own time. After sharing a hearty meal by lamplight and a quiet conversation about the day, Leo, still a little disoriented but deeply impacted, prepared to leave. Jacob had offered him a place to stay, but Leo felt an inexplicable pull to move, to process, to begin the journey back to whatever awaited him. "Thank you, Jacob," Leo said, standing at the edge of the porch light illuminating the earnestness in his eyes. "For everything. I never knew." Jacob simply nodded, a gentle smile on his face. "There's much to know, Leo. The world is full of lessons if you open yourself to them." As Leo walked away, his steps more confident than before, Jacob watched him go until his form was swallowed by the night. The sound of his footsteps eventually faded, leaving Jacob alone on his porch, enveloped in the peaceful hush of the evening. He settled into his favorite rocking chair, the rhythmic creak a comforting counterpoint to the chirping crickets. The last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in a final, glorious burst of fiery reds and deep purples. Jacob gazed at his fields, dark and still under the emerging stars,
then at the barn, a silent sentinel of his labor. His hands, calloused and strong, rested on his knees, testament to a lifetime of honest work. He thought of the day's unexpected visitor, a man lost in a world he barely comprehended, and felt a quiet gratitude for his own existence. He had food in the larder, warmth in his home, and the knowledge that he was capable of providing for himself and his family, come what may. No need for complex machines, no reliance on fickle networks. Just the land, his hands, and the timeless wisdom passed down through generations. He took a deep breath, the clean, cool air filling his lungs, and a profound sense of peace settled over him. Life was good. Simple, yes, but profoundly, undeniably